So, welcome to the Down to Earth mindfulness show for busy mums. And a mindfulness show wouldn't be a mindfulness show without some kind of definition of mindfulness. So that's what I'm going to be exploring in today's episode. And it's going to be a really brief overview because each other episode following this, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about each aspect that I've explained today. So one of the first things I want to say, though, is that mindfulness is one of those phrases that, nearly everybody has heard these days. It's great that it's everywhere because it means that more people are able to access it. And it's really gone from being something which is associated with Buddhism to, it's really quite mainstream now, which is fantastic. But I also think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there. There's a lot of people that have heard of it, that just think they can't do it, or they don't like the sound of it, or it doesn't mean a lot to them. And I think that's such a shame that a lot of people who really, really could benefit from it are just put off, really, more or less straight away. And I often think this is because of how it's explained. And often when people define mindfulness, it's explained, generally the sort of the definition is something like increasing our ability to be aware non-judgmentally of the present moment. And it's not that that's not right. Obviously, that is a completely accurate, widespread, and very long-held definition. But I don't think it means a great deal to the average person. And it also indicates that we should be sort of floating around in this non-judgmental cloud, and somehow disengaging from life is a thing that will help us feel happier and calmer. And I think there's a lot more to mindfulness that can really help people. So I like to, when I'm explaining it to people, clients, one-to-one clients, or in groups, I do like to go into a bit more detail and explain things in more practical, down-to-earth and easy to understand way. So I tend to divide it into, because this has really helped me understand it when I was learning and practicing it for myself and then learning. And I divide mindfulness, rather than just one general sentence, I divide it into sort of different aspects that can be helpful to us. And one of the first things that tends to hook people into mindfulness, and one of the main ways in which it can help us, although this is not the only way, and sometimes it's not the most helpful way, but it's one of the main ways, is that it helps us to change our relationship with our thoughts. Now, a lot of people think that when they're practicing mindfulness, it's about clearing their mind of thoughts, and it's easy to understand why you would think that, because there's a lot of emphasis placed on focusing on, different anchors like your breath or your body or a cup of tea and things. And that gives the impression that you're meant to be focusing on those things with a view to clearing your mind. And that's not the case. It's a really important concept to sort of understand when you start practicing mindfulness, is that we're not clearing our mind of thoughts, because we will always have thoughts. We are changing our relationship with our thoughts. Now, in my next programme, we'll go into more detail about why we need to do that and how. But all you really need to understand to get going is that we're not pushing thoughts away, we are observing our thoughts. And there's something about observing our thoughts that helps to manage our reactions to unhelpful thoughts. And also, the more we practice mindfulness, we are, eventually able to choose where to place our attention. So we might bring it back to something in the present moment rather than them snowballing, but we will still have those thoughts to begin with. And what you're doing with mindfulness, you're practicing the ability to bring it back. So you're changing your relationship because you're observing your thoughts, but you're also more able to manage them. Now, the other aspect of mindfulness, which actually for me is probably one of the most helpful, particularly when it comes to being a busy mum and managing stress. And again, it was something that I only came across after a few years of practicing perhaps more traditional mindfulness in my local Buddhist centre, is that increases our awareness of our body and breath. And, our body and breath, obviously, when we're stressed about something or unhappy, we're having unhelpful thoughts. But most of the time, our difficult emotions reside in the body. we will be feeling, when we're feeling stressed or anxious or whatever, something will be going on physically in the body and also the breath. So any sort of negative well-being will be changing how our body and breath is, but we're actually not that aware of it. We know how we feel and we know that we're going around and we're reacting in a certain way, but we're not actually physically aware of what's going on in our body most of the time. Or if we are, we're kind of reacting against it. So what we do with mindfulness, and I found this really, really transformative, was you start to notice what is going on in the body. It doesn't really need to involve lots of mindfulness practices, but start to notice on a moment-to-moment basis, how you're feeling physically. Are your shoulders tense? Are your jaws clenched? Is there a sort of knot in your stomach? That kind of thing. And it's being aware of that is the first step to being able to regulate it. Most people aren't aware of what is going on below, the neck downwards, and it's that lack of awareness that causes us to react to situations. So when you start to practice mindfulness, a big part of it, particularly on courses that I run, is all about increasing your body awareness, and it can make all the difference in helping you to respond to situations rather than react. So the other aspects I'm going to briefly explore is around acceptance and compassion. When we start to practice mindfulness of thoughts and body, rather than pushing things away, trying to push difficult thoughts away, or pushing difficult feelings away, we start to be able to accept. And this is the bit where the non-judgmental side comes in. But I prefer to use terms like kind of acceptance or allowing, or curiosity. We tend to feel a certain way, which isn't very pleasant. So, for example, we might feel a sense of dread in the chest, and we'll react against it. And we won't want it to be there, and it's that reaction that will exacerbate, and actually it makes us feel worse. And one of the best things we can do to help with that is learn mindfulness to allow us to start to notice the feelings in the body, which is where the awareness comes in, but then start to be able to tolerate and explore it and sit with it. And I find this is definitely really, it's really helped me, and it's helped lots of my clients, because it's such a useful skill to have, but most people don't know it. And being able to do that ultimately is based on being mindful. And the final thing to explore is compassion. And compassion it's kind of separate to mindfulness in some senses, in that it can be, seen as a separate skill, a separate discipline, and that kind of thing. But it comes from mindfulness. It comes from the same sort of Buddhist teachings about the importance of mindfulness and kindness to ourselves and other people to help with feeling happy and content. And when we are mindful, we are more aware of our needs and more likely to meet them. So we naturally become more compassionate to ourselves. But we also can start to, through the mindfulness practices, and often on a mindfulness course, you will learn specific meditations and specific skills to cultivate a feeling of kindness towards yourself. And there's overwhelming evidence that now shows that is very, very important in helping our well-being, because it manages the fight and flight response, tones down shame, tones down self-criticism, and I'm obviously going to do a lots more programs on compassion. So just coming to the end of the episode, so just briefly summarising. Mindfulness helps us observe our thoughts, but it also helps us increase awareness of body and breath, accept difficult feelings, and be kinder to ourselves. If you keep on listening, my next episode will be going into more depth about how we can use mindfulness to manage unhelpful thoughts, so why we need it and how we can use it to manage unhelpful thoughts. Thanks for listening.